Okay, so we have discussed in the last two videos how to digitally ink within Photopea, the free raster-based version of Photoshop, or a browser-based version of a raster program like Photoshop. We've discussed how you can use it with or without a tablet and stylus. With or without the smooth tool being turned on. The smooth tool does slow it down a little bit. But if you're a jittery inker, it can be very, very helpful. But then, of course, the limitations of this are that your inks are made out of pixels, right? And so you want to make sure that your workspace is at least 8 inches at 350 pixels per inch. Now, professionally, ideally, it's best to do your line art as a vector. So it's infinitely scalable, so it's not locked. So I brought in my sketch to this Adobe program Illustrator, and I'm using the tool Blob Brush, which, much like the brush in Photopea, allows me to set a certain smoothness, make it, and because I have a tablet, I can make it pressure sensitive, so that when I zoom in and ink, it can have that variety in the brush. And it's like using an ink brush. In fact, I have my stylus pretty big and sensitive right now, so it's a lot like a Sumi ink brush. It's maybe a little too responsive. And so I can play with those settings. But what I love about this Blob Brush tool is that any marks that I add will just get combined onto the same path that then I can modify later just like I would any other vector if I need to smooth it out or change it. And the biggest benefit is that unlike the raster line art from Photopea, when I zoom in, you see that it's perfectly smooth. You can see the raster sketch behind it, but the ink work is perfectly smooth, like a logo. Versus in Photopea, I zoom in, and the ink work is made of little square pixels. But as long as it's high enough resolution, the end result will look roughly the same. So that is the Blob Brush. And I'll use this a lot professionally. And I have to vary the settings for each project, right? Okay, the other way. If you're not liking your options thus far for digital inking, is to take a piece of tracing paper and just ink it traditionally. So here you can see a scan of inks, and I think I used a fine point Sharpie for this. Fine point Sharpies, black, permanent black Sharpies are actually a brown black that's not super dark compared to, black pixels. So what I need to do is then open that sketch up in Photopea. I'll close preview because I don't want to waste that memory. So I'm going to open up my traditional inks in Photopea. But this isn't going to work to color behind. We want it to look as good as this, as solid and as black and as clean. So how do we get there? Well, we use what we know about compositing, right? What we learned about image adjustment. So what I'll do is bring it in and then go to image adjustments, play with the levels, with the histogram here. First, I'm going to shift up the highlights a little bit just to clean up any kind of stray marks. That's why I also recommend that you ink on a piece of tracing paper rather than ink over your pencils and then erase your pencils, because your pencil will always leave a little bit of grayness behind that has to be cleaned up. Then I'm going to take the midtone slider, move it to the right to darken everything. But still leave some of the gaps. And then I can take the shadows and just push that a little bit to the right to make sure everything's solid black. So far so good. That looks pretty clean. Now, all of that only works. Oh, and you want to be careful not to have any color. So you see how I have some color left over from the scan? It is best to scan in color. You'll get the most accurate image, but then you want to take out all the color in this layer. So I go to Image, Adjustment, Desaturate. And this is the same in Photoshop as it is in Photopea. Now you'll get little things like this, little areas that you might need to clean up because they're going to affect your coloring otherwise. Because you only want kind of black. And then you'll also notice that as well as scanning the black, your computer doesn't know the difference. It also scanned all the white pixels or all the gray pixels from your tracing paper. So I need to select all the white and delete it, right? So an easy way to do this is to make sure your background layer isn't locked. Mine is not. To unlock, you can often use the padlock and unlock it, or you can rename it and unlock it, or you can create a duplicate, Command J, turn off the background layer, and that will be an unlocked layer that allows for transparency. Then I want to use the magic wand. I want a tolerance that's fairly high, so I'm going to use 32, and I'm going to uncheck contiguous. I'm not going to feather it at all. And I'm going to select on the white space or the empty space and then just hit delete. And that will give me the checkerboard behind and give me clean line art on top. And to see that, I can always make a new layer behind it, fill it with white, just like we did with our logos, and get a sense of it. It's got a little remnant, of the gray. So you're just trying to get the cleanest you can. To fix that, I can go back and I can try slight feathering. So maybe like a 2-pixel feather. And then delete. So I use my magic wand with a 2-pixel feather, select on the empty space. Doesn't feel like it's doing it. There we go. And then go in and delete that. And because it's got that feathering, it's going to soften it a little bit. And then I can play with the adjustment settings again and levels and make sure all those grays are solid. like so. So pretty clean, strong blacks. Now, the difficulty of this approach, so that's some nice line art that I can color behind. And I've digitized it now. I've made it digital inking. But it's all contingent on what my resolution is, right? So I scanned it at 3.5 inches by 5 inches, roughly at 400 pixels per inch. But if I force it up to be the same as my other, so 8 inches wide by 350, that's a little bit bigger. And so it softens it a little bit, but that's still close enough. It's hard to get resolution that good without a scanner. So keep that in mind. But if you have a scanner available, it doesn't need to be a good scanner. It just needs to be one that can do at least an 8-inch image at 350 pixels per inch. And then also when you use just your camera phone or something to take the image, it's going to have different angles in it, different shadows, all things you have to clean up. I'm not saying you can't do it, it just takes a lot of extra work. But these are all the different ways you can get to finished line work. And the goal is to get to finished line work before next class so that we can just work on the different coloring. All right. So of these different options, I think I'm actually going to go ahead and continue with what I was doing in Photopea, just with the trackpad. Just because Illustrator's being strange and I want to demonstrate to you the things I'm actually able to reproduce no matter where I am, no matter what tools are available to me. So I'm going to put my tablet away. I'm going to close these different options and go back to what I was doing. And it's also showing that from the same sketch, your inking is going to look slightly different depending on the tools you use, right? And one's not necessarily better than another. So I'm just using a trackpad now, but I wanted to show you all those options so you can be informed when you run into issues with your inking. You can hopefully make the decision that's best for the tools and the time that you have and relates to the skills you most want to build for yourself. So this is a lot more than just tracing your sketch. It's deciding, what elements should be thick, what should be thin, where should you have kind of some texture. You can put in shading like hatching, other marks, little incidentals. I can thicken lines as I need them, even though this isn't a pressure sensitive tool I'm using. I can double them up, I can taper them off. And unlike traditional inking, I can erase completely if I need to. I have the lower jaw here.